Welcome to the Permanent Podcast, real talk about owning, operating, buying, and selling small businesses. The reality is that businesses are made up of people, and people are messy. So, how do you navigate such a messy and complicated landscape? Well, let's talk about it on the Permanent Podcast.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
I just don't know what a snow day is anymore. Like, what is a snow day?
Yeah.
Because it just rained.
It just rained.
It's not below freezing.
Literally, like there's no way it could have frozen. Yes, I concur with your assessment. All right.
This begins the first guest in our new series, Brent. We're calling this Outside Insights on the Permanent Podcast. People from outside the permanent equity firm that we think have insights to share in or around the SMB space. They may not be in the SMB space. And Brent, I know we're going to be talking to Shane today. Who is Shane Parrish?
Yeah, well, Shane has become a great friend. We've known each other for 10 years.
Okay.
He's one of my favorite people.
I followed him on his podcast. I've seen a couple of videos. He's very deliberate when he speaks and thoughtful and seemingly intentional with everything he does.
Yeah, I would say intentionality is a great way to describe his life. I mean, over the last 10 years, the compounding of knowledge that has occurred, that I've just watched him explore all these different areas.
Right. The Knowledge Project.
The Knowledge Project is incredible. And I mean, before that, he was a high-ranking member of a 3-letter agency in Canada.
Okay.
And worked to protect the interests of Canada and the United States as well in really unusual ways. And you don't fall into a job like that. Like, he's outrageously intelligent. He's very insightful. And I think that that's what my hope is for this call, is that he is able to demonstrate that. And I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is that I hope I don't interrupt him too much, because he has these like layers of knowledge that, you know.
I feel like you're yelling at me because I interrupt you a lot.
Yeah.
Like just now.
I'm trying to be passive aggressive about it.
What I want to get better at is not interrupting people.
Did the eye contact give it away? Listeners can't hear that, but you know, oftentimes I'll ask Shane a question and I feel like he delivers a really thoughtful response and then pauses, and I usually take that to mean, okay, well, so on to the next thing, right. Or I have a follow-up question. And I've learned, and I'm hopeful to do this today, is not to do that, because letting Shane sit for a second, he gets to these like second, third, fourth levels and he connects dots that I just would never connect. He's also, something most people don't know, he's an incredible investor. So he takes all of this knowledge and he webs it together in such a way that it gives him true actionable insights into where to invest resources. And so I don't think it's my place to talk about all the different ways in which he's invested, but I really hope that he at least demonstrates a little bit of it, because it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake.
Right.
It's knowledge to do something with it.
I mean, in your questioning, do you think you can double down on how things are helpful for people operating a business, working on a team, small business spaces?
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope for this entire sort of series for the podcast, is that we want to make it actionable to small business owners, operators, people in the space. This might be a little more esoteric today. Okay. And I think we need to be okay with that.
Sure.
I mean, Shane is an incredible operator of a small company and has invested in many small companies. So he knows the space inside and out. The way Shane works is he takes first principles and builds up from them. And I'm not sure where we'll get in terms of the build up today, but we'll see where it goes.
I'm excited. I think he's about to jump on.
Great. Let's do it. Shane, how are you feeling, man?
I'm good. Can you just give me 30 seconds to grab a glass of water? I just wanted to make sure I could log in first.
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm sous videing ribs
You're
now
ribs
as
right
we
now?
speak.
Are you serious?
They are boiling in water right now.
You are a master sous vide.
Do you have a sous vide, Shane?
I do, yeah. I'm not nearly as good of a cook as Brent is, though. I see his like food on Twitter and I just like salivate.
No, Brent has an easy bake oven for dads. It's a Traeger. You too could have this.
I have a Traeger too. Wait, what is this?
Well, then you're fine. You're doing the same stuff. You put it in.
David claims that there's no skill, and my food just tastes better than his food, though. So I'm just gonna throw it out there that maybe I learned a few things.
I got a sous vide in November for my birthday, so I'm on probably cook. I don't know. Let's call it cook 10. And I read you could do ribs, which sounds weird to do ribs. It's like a smoking thing. Weird. So I've had them in there. Well, I did it last night, so it'll be 24 hours when I pull them out. And then I'm going to put them on the smoker for like 2 hours, with some pretty aggressive smoke to see if I can get that flavor still in that char or that.
Dude, I can't wait to hear how that goes.
So what are you smoking it with? Like, what's your smoker? Are you like big green egg kind of guy?
Yeah, I just have a Kamado, which is not, in my opinion, a great smoker. And so I've always the reason it does taste better when Brent does it on his Easy Bake Oven for dads is because it tastes better. It does better than a Kamado. But a Kamado's a great grill. I love it as a grill.
It's only as good as the operator, David.
Shane, look, this is our first time meeting each other. I really appreciate you being here. I have worked with Brent for about 7 months now. We've known each other for a really long time. Brent tells me you guys have been friends for a really long time. Yeah. And so I just want to say thanks for being here. And I just wanted to open before Brent kind of takes over and ask you.
Also, you have to be on when you talk to Brent.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you and I mean that. I mean this in the best way possible and the best way imaginable. But like I walk away from our conversations, whether they're 15 minutes or an hour, and my head is like exploding. And Brent is like full of energy. And I'm like, oh my God.
There's a term somebody said, Brent lag, which is like jet lag for hanging out with me.
Oh, that's good.
So
there's probably some truth to that in the best way possible, right? Like you burn hot. You're switched on all the time.
Since we're competing in this dad bod challenge, David, I hope that I continue to burn hot so I can burn off all that excess fat that I have. So
January brought about a dad bod challenge where we're basically anteed up, and whoever loses the most percentage of their body weight wins the money.
Why does it take January to get healthy? Like, I don't understand this. Shouldn't you be healthy all the time? Like, you want to live a long life.
Yeah, but then there's fudge and bacon.
I think it frames up some of the things we're going to talk about. But
I love that answer. You know, it's like, that's true, but
two things happened. One, a buddy of ours got the little community going, and two, there's competition involved, which is a motivator. And I think it just worked out that January was the time because it lines up with the season of New Year's resolutions.
Renewal.
It's January 6th right now. Most people have already broken their resolutions.
I'm rocking it.
I'm down so much. I don't even want to tell David how much weight I'm down.
I think you should just work out every day, man. I don't understand this. People, you need motivation to go 3 days a week. You don't need motivation to go 7 days a week.
You don't need motivation to go 7 days a week.
No, because then it's not a choice. You need motivation when it's a choice. You don't need motivation when you go every day.
Man, Shane,
well, dude.
You are a fountain of wisdom. You're a fountain of wisdom.
It's easier to go 7 days a week than 3 days a week. Because if you do it 3 days a week, you need motivation. It's a choice. If you do it every day, it's just something you do every day. You have to find a place to do it, and you do it. It's not a choice. You can't like mentally convince yourself, I'll do it tomorrow. You're just going to work out. You're going to the gym. That's part of living a healthy life. That's what you're going to do today.
So on Twitter, you said, let inertia work for you. The person who has to negotiate with themselves every day loses to the person who just designs their day for what they want it to be. This is in line with what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, if you're relying on willpower to do all the things that you want to do, you're never going to do them. You're just going to get stuck, and you're going to convince yourself with these great stories that you'll do it tomorrow. And, you know, instead of going on the elliptical today, you're like, I don't feel like it. I'll do extra tomorrow. And these are like the lies that we tell ourselves. But then, you know, tomorrow comes and you still don't feel like it. And then all of a sudden it's, you know, January 7th and you haven't been in the gym for 3 days and your New Year's resolutions are gone. And you're not living the life that you want to be living.
My God, where have you been all my life? Will you just be my life coach, Shane?
Can you build into your day to call Brent every morning?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to need you to just build in your life coaching.
Think about that for a second. One of the reasons that works is you have external accountability. Somebody calling you to check in on you, right? Yeah. So I have a friend who works out. He does it 5 days a week, but he has a personal trainer every day. And the reason he does is if he didn't have a personal trainer, he wouldn't go.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I am. Like I do 3 days a week of heavy lifting, and I'll do like I love going on walks or bike rides and stuff like that. Like I love playing tennis. I'll do those because those are enjoyable for me. Lifting heavy weights, I think just sucks. And the only way I'll do it is if I have somebody standing over me telling me to do it. And so I've realized this about myself. Like I can't do it on my own.
What a luxury that we have though, right? It's like, I don't like doing this. I don't want to do it, even though we know it's good for us and we know we should do it. And we know afterwards we feel better and we're happy.
I don't feel better. I feel like I'm always sore. It actually sucks.
I think, you know, I just look at it kind of backwards, right? Like I want to put myself in the best position possible to live a long and healthy life. And what do I need to be doing today to make that happen? Because like one of the pillars that we often sacrifice in life when we get busy, when things get stressed, is sort of our health, right? We stop sleeping as much. We stop going to the gym. Those are the first things that we really cut out, and we're sacrificing our future self in order to optimize, I guess, the present moment.
Yeah, I really like the taste of food. I like to eat a lot of it. Now that we're on confession
Well,
time.
you're an awesome cook. That's part of the problem. You should cook less good. You cook like a Michelin star restaurant.
I freaking love to cook. I just absolutely love it. Going back to, I'm just curious. So you work out every day. Is that correct?
Yeah, I go every day.
When was the last time you didn't work out?
Probably October.
Okay. What caused the disruption?
Travel.
So going back to that, instead of negotiating with yourself, deciding what you're going to do each day, is every one of your days the same blocked out regiment? How much variation is there? Is every Tuesday the same, or is just 7 days a week are all the same?
There's quite a bit of variation to my day, but it's not a choice that I'm going to go to the gym. And it might only be that I go 20 minutes. Like, I'm not saying go for like 2 hours. I might just show up and do 20 minutes and then go home. And what I do at the gym doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I do weights or cardio or even sit in the sauna. Like, that can be part of going to the gym because that's an activity that increases your heart rate, makes you healthier. That can be part of it. And so for me, it's just I go every day. So I get up. I know I have to fit that in. Sometimes I fit it in at 4 p.m. Sometimes I fit it in at 12. For me, it's often the transition between different parts of my day. So in the morning, I don't usually take meetings before 12, before 1. I tend to focus the mornings on the biggest opportunity in front of me. That's my best time of the day. And so I want to work on what's the biggest opportunity? What are the seeds that I'm planting for next year? Like, I never need to find the time because I just block it the mornings. And then the afternoon tends to be the miscellaneous stuff, right? Like accountants and lawyers and calls and talks and all this stuff. And so for me, I often use the gym as my transition between morning and afternoon to make sure I have a little bit of energy in the afternoon too, so I'm not just totally drained.
I love that. So give us an example of like some of the things that you've tackled over the last couple of weeks that are like that morning time. Like, how did you evolve into using that schedule?
Yeah, well, so I started this back when I worked at the intelligence agency, was just blocking off my time so I could actually get work done. I mean, that the culture that I ended up working in was so meeting focused. You'd have to come in at like 5 a.m. to get anything done or stay past 7 p.m. That was when you would do your work. And it's like, well, how flawed is the organization if I have to come in early or stay late to do what I'm actually paid to do? What am I doing during the day? So I just started like blocking off these times in my calendar, and I couldn't do it right away because everybody has all these meetings. But like 6 months in the future, I was like, I have a good string of like 9 to 10 a.m. So I started blocking off just like a meeting with myself so nobody could book me. And then 6 months came around and I'm like, oh my God, I got this free time. I can do my work. And it's just sort of carried over into that. And then things that I've worked on, like I've been working on a book that comes out October 3rd called Clear Thinking. So I've been editing that. I've been writing that. That is my time. I never have to find the time. It never has to fit in. Like, it's there. I have time every day. So I'm doing the edits for that the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Man, I love that. I always love chatting with you about this stuff because I feel like I can learn so much. You're so much more disciplined.
Well, it's just inspiring.
I know it's inspiring and disciplined.
I'm like, I'm making some changes.
Well, it's interesting you use the word discipline. I don't use that. I think of it as a ritual. I don't have a ton of discipline, but ritual I can do. This is the part of like doing things every day, right? Discipline means I'm making a choice, choosing to do something. I often need motivation or excitement to get to discipline. But like ritual cements what I want to do with discipline. And ritual is good. You do it every day, right? You do it all the time. You do it when you feel like it. You do it when you don't feel like it because that is what you do. And it's so powerful. And it doesn't involve a lot of willpower.
We've been friends now for, over 10 years. I was looking back and it's amazing how long we've known each other. Of all the people who I've watched over a 10-year period, like you are just a learning machine. Like I've watched you just continuously learn and grow. And it's like such a fun thing as your friend to watch this. But maybe to back up before then, you mentioned before you worked for an intelligence agency in Canada. I know you can't talk about a lot of that stuff. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about like the shift from being a government employee, a salaried employee, to being an entrepreneur. Maybe take us back. When did you realize you wanted to start something, and what were the steps that you took as a government employee, salaried, to step out into this other world of starting something new?
Yeah, I think, hindsight's 2020. So I'll say that with like, my answer at the time probably would have been a lot different than it is today. And I will also say I loved working for a 3-letter agency. Like, I love serving my country. I love the challenges that I was working on. I loved everything about that. When I joined, it was like joining a startup, right? We didn't have a sign on the door. We didn't exist. We weren't a budget line item. Nobody knew anything about us. And we were some of the best people in the world at what we particularly did. And then September 11th hit, and all of a sudden, the world changed, right? There was a lot more oversight. There was a lot more money going into it. There was a lot more government feel to it. And eventually, over the next sort of, I would say 10, 12 years, it just became more government. I didn't want to work for the government. I wanted to work for a 3-letter intelligence agency solving problems that had never been solved before, that you can't Google, in this sort of like cat and mouse game with other countries. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to meetings all day. I didn't want all of the extras that sort of came along with these budget line items all of a sudden. That's not to say, I don't want anybody to take away from this that intelligence agencies shouldn't have oversight, because we should. What I'm talking about is sort of like the meetings for the sake of meetings, everything going slow. I mean, the decisions that I was making at 26 would now be made by, effectively the head of agency for us. And so that's the stuff that I was really excited about. And, so you can think of it as starting sort of like at a startup. And then when I left, it was more like IBM. And it slowly just dawned on me that it wasn't going to go backwards. It wasn't going to change to the thing that I loved. And that's a hard realization to come to. And gradually, I just sort of was like, okay, well, I don't want to spend my days doing this. I don't want to spend my days and my time this way. I have one life and I want to get out. And luckily, I had started sort of Farnam Street while I was there as this project to just basically categorize what I was learning. I mean, the idea behind Farnam Street is to master the best of what other people have figured out. And so I had this website, which was anonymous because, 3-letter agencies sort of frown on public profiles, but it was about learning and decision-making and sort of innovation. And I decided that I was just going to go full-time into that and see what that looked like. And luckily I had saved up, some leave and a bit of money, and I just sort of left. I mean, it was, how did I transition it? I just knew I was leaving. And then about 6 months after I left, I burned my bridges. And I don't mean that in a relationship point of view. I just like, you know what? I don't want my pension. I want you to cancel that. Just give me the money. I don't want to have an option to come back. And that doesn't make any financial sense, but it made a lot of psychological sense to me because I needed to go all in on me. And I think the only way for me to go all in on me was to sort of make sure that there was no escape hatch for me other than success. And that
burn the ships.
Yeah, I mean, that helps you focus, right? Like when there was one point where I was like, man, if I could just get to 55, I'll be fine, because then my pension kicks in. And I was like, that's just such a flawed way of thinking about it. I got to burn the ships. I got to focus my attention on this. Nobody's coming to save me.
I know you don't talk about this a lot publicly, but we've talked about it privately. Farnam Street's turned into this quite successful organization. Have you been surprised at the success of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think mostly it's luck and timing, right? I think it'd be a lot harder to do what we've done today.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I try to make it a little bit less about luck every day. We started a podcast back before everybody had a podcast. And so now we have an audience where we get 500,000 people will listen to an episode on average. And I think if you come out with a podcast today, that's really hard to get that audience. We have a lot of stickiness from our audience that we already had. We've made every mistake along the way with that as well. The same as the website. It's really hard to build a website today with the audience we have of, millions of visits a month, or a newsletter with over 500,000 people on it. That's really hard to come up with today. And it happens. And there's people that sort of break through that. But I think it's a lot harder today. There's a lot more competition today in that space than there was when we started.
Yeah, it's such interesting because you have a business about learning. I mean, that really is the core of your business, is helping others learn what you've learned. And what is the process for your exploration?
This is such a fun question. I don't have a great answer to this, but I'll walk you through sort of how I think about it, which is it depends on what I want to learn. But the first thing I want to decide is, who is worth listening to and who's not. What's the best source of information? Am I getting a high quality information? And then if you break learning down into different things, it's like, do I want to learn a tactic or do I want to learn perspective? And you can approach those differently, right? If I want to learn perspective, I probably want to talk to someone who's been around the block, someone older, someone that can offer life advice about what matters and what doesn't. I want to read old books because I want to find out what's still true. Tactics are different, right? If I want to grow an email list or grow my particular business, or in that case, I want to go to somebody who's done it, but not somebody that did it 20 years ago. I want to go to somebody that did it like 2 weeks ago, right? Because these things tend to age off. So like this is one of the mistakes we make with like mentors, right? We often think that the way that they got their success is the way we're going to get our success. And their experience might have been relevant 20 years ago in this particular tactic, but it's not relevant today. So you want to go to somebody for a tactic who's just done the thing that you want to do and you want to learn from them. And that offers the highest probability that that'll still apply. The environment's probably still relatively the same as it was. If it worked for them, it might work for you. You might have to tweak it. But going to somebody who did the same thing you're trying to do 20 years ago, much different operating environment than what you're in, than what you're facing. But that person probably offers general lessons, problems to avoid, different things, right? That's where perspective comes in. And so I really sort of try to break it down into what I'm trying to learn. And then that dictates the source, where I'm going for information, how I'm going about pursuing it. And then the other thing is you probably want to talk to 2 or 3 people and triangulate sort of like what they're saying, even with tactics, right? You want to talk to 2 or 3 people who've done it. What are the key variables that they're talking about? How do I translate those into something that makes sense for me and works in my particular situation? I can't expect just a tool or tactic to sort of come into my environment, work in my situation without sort of tweaking, modifying, watching. Perspective is different. Perspective is like, hey, what can I learn from these people? What am I going to regret? What problems am I likely to encounter by doing this? And I think that that's sort of how I pursue exploring things. It's all curiosity driven for me. And then I make all of that public for everybody else through the Knowledge Project and through the website, fs.blog. And for me, the key to learning is reflection.
I mean, speaking of helping in audiences, the audience for this is small business owners and operators. Maybe you could talk to them directly. Like, what should owners and operators think about this idea of continuous learning? I mean, just kind of like walk somebody through who's let's say you're an executive at a Midwest manufacturing firm and, really you haven't read a book in a long time. You listen to this podcast and you're like, gosh, that sounds amazing. There seems like so much wisdom. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I work this into my life?
Well, let's reframe this question just slightly, right? If I told you there was something you're going to do every day for the rest of your life and that it's going to compound in such a way that any incremental gain today is going to be your new baseline for tomorrow, you would instantly recognize that being a little bit better at this thing over a long period of time would translate into massively different results. And that thing is learning. And we all have an opportunity to learn every day. But here's the kicker. No one's ever or rarely sat you down and been like, here's how you learn. We've sort of got this message that we learn from experience. And if you have an experience, then you will learn from it. Well, that's not true, right? An experience is necessary, but it's not sufficient for learning to take place. For learning to take place, you need to reflect on that experience. You can learn from meetings, you can learn from books, you can learn from conversations. Those are all experiences that you're having, but you won't learn unless you reflect on what you're learning. So a great example is like walking out of a meeting. You can think to yourself, oh, that meeting didn't go well. What would I have said differently? What could I have done differently? How did I respond in this particular question? Was I prepared? Was I not prepared? Well, now you're reflecting on that meeting. And those reflections are going to dictate what you do next time. And if you think of learning as a loop and just picture at 12, the 12 hand, you have an experience. At the 3 hand, you have a reflection. At the 6 hand, you have an abstraction. And at the 9 hand, you have an action. And that action creates an experience. So you can sort of see the loop and this circle of learning. I call it the learning loop. If you take away reflection, you have an experience and then you have an abstraction. Well, that's sort of like the illusion of knowledge. And this is how we consume information too. So when I said check quality of sources, like that's a super important component to learning. What I mean is I want rich, detailed, firsthand experiences. Books are great for this because books, and we live in a world where we just want the sound bites and we don't actually want all the details. We just want the answer. And the problem with that is the answer is the abstraction. But the abstraction, if you think of it, is sort of like following a recipe. And if it doesn't work, I don't know why it didn't work. But the chef who prepared that recipe tried like 1,000 times to perfect everything. So they can sort of taste the result and be like, nah, the heat was too high. There wasn't enough salt in there. But the sort of line cook, if you will, follows the recipe, doesn't get the right result. And they don't know why. And that why becomes part of the reflection. So you have to reflect to learn. And we have an opportunity every day in nearly every situation. After this call, I'll reflect. Like, I'll listen to this. I'll think about it. I'll be like, oh, I should have said this, or I should have framed it this way because I think that would be more powerful for people listening to this. And if we don't reflect, we really don't learn. So where to get started? You don't need a book to get started. You can just think about the last thing you did, especially if it's something you're going to do repeatedly. Meetings, calls with people, sales pitches, all of these things. If you spend 2 minutes afterwards just in this sort of reflection, and for me, reflection often means writing things down because I sort of reflect best when I write things down, but not always. Reflection can just be a space where you're thinking about your day. So I often use the sauna as a ritual to reflect. And so when I talk about going to the gym every day, some days it's just the sauna. I'll go in there for 25 minutes and man, do I get a good workout because that thing is freaking hot. But what am I doing in the sauna? Well, I can't use my phone. I can't use my watch. I think, right? The sauna is the best spot to think. I lie down. I can just sort of like walk through something, walk through a problem that I'm facing, walk through something that just happened. And what do I want to do differently? How do I want to think about that differently? Running is the same way, or the elliptical or whatever. We distract ourselves. We listen to audiobooks. We try to fill every moment with information when really we have a lot of the information. We just need to sort of digest it and make it our own and make it usable for us.
When you talk about these sources of knowledge, you talked about, hey, I'm going to go back and read the history of things to really understand what strategies or maybe the, very high level life philosophies. What are those treasure troves of knowledge that are maybe publicly available, but largely ignored?
If you agree with me that the world is busier than ever, and a byproduct of that is sort of that we're always looking for the gist of things, and we're always looking for the sound bites, that you can draw a couple of implications from that. One is that we like new things. Two is we want the phrase, the tweet, the recipe, if you will, instead of the understanding of what made the recipe. And that means that there's a whole series of things that just tend to get overlooked, right? Like anything old would tend to be overlooked because we like new things. But if you read something old and you find something in it that's still true today, chances are it'll still be true in 100 years. You probably hit on some fundamental truth. And that's not going to expire. So learning about things that don't expire is usually a pretty good way to spend your time. And then we don't tend to like detail because that podcast, that's like 90 minutes. I don't want to listen to the 90-minute version. We get this all the time. Like people are like, can you send us a 30-minute version of this? And it's like, no. If we get one of the world's experts on the line, we want them to talk and we want them to go into detail. I want to learn about their experiences. I want to see how they reflect it. I don't want just the answers. Anybody can tell me the answers, but I'm not going to learn. You have a treasure trove of knowledge probably within 10 miles of your house, which is I don't know what they're called in the States, but like old age homes or senior residences there's a treasure trove of knowledge in that building right there. And if you go spend time with them, you're going to learn a lot of perspective.
I mean, for me, a massive source of wisdom over the last really 2 years has been elders. And I can't get enough. If I find somebody who I admire, who's in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I mean, I am on them, and I love to ask them, probing questions about what they wish they would have known earlier and all that.
Wait, before we go to me, I got to hear more about this. You can't just drop this wisdom bomb and then be like, hey, by the way, no, man, tell me more about that. How do you find them? And then what do you ask them?
Yeah.
And then how do you incorporate that into your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've largely found them through serendipity. I've not found a way to systematize it. It's something they've said, or a friend who says, oh my gosh, I know this person. I'd love to make an introduction, or I meet them at an event or something. And there's an elder radar now that I have where I can just tell the way they look at me, the sound of their voice. They're like, the elder has this look that they look at you, and they're for you. They're excited about you. They're excited about actually learning from you as well, but they're excited about pouring into you. And boy, when I find one of those people now who I really respect, I look at their life, I look at the totality of their life, and I say, oh man, that is something that I admire. Then I'm locked in. And I mean, questions I ask them are probably the obvious ones, which is hey, what is something that, I'm almost 40. When you were 40, how do you think the world worked that it really just didn't work the way you thought it did? Or what were the things that you would go back, if you could have an hour or 2 hours to go back and talk to that person? What would you say to yourself at 40? What would you warn yourself about? And I mean, not specific events, but more of what are the philosophies or the underpinnings that you thought at 40 that maybe just aren't true? I also like to ask this question, and I got an amazing life-changing response from one gentleman named Todd Peterson, longtime kicker in the NFL, owns a series of successful businesses, is actually the guy who it's called an organization called Illuminations that's trying to translate the Bible into every language in the world by 2030. Just an unbelievable elder. And I asked him, I said, hey, what is one thing that you would change about your life at 35 or 40 that would be just life-changing? And he said, well, I'd get up every day and I'd read the Bible, which obviously is a source of knowledge, deep Lindy effect knowledge. And he said, I would do this exercise. What do I know about my relationship to God? What do I know about the world based on what I read? Who should I be and what should I do? And he's like, it doesn't have to be long, but do it every single day. And he's like, I've been doing this with a group of guys now for 15 years, and it's life-changing. Your life will never be the same. And I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks. And he was like, hey, whoa. I just told you this is the one thing that I would change about my life if I were your age. And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, so don't gloss over it. Literally do it. And I said, well, I don't know where to get started. And he said, well, why don't I just start sending them to you? And I said, okay, that'd be great. So this was a year ago, November, he started sending these to me. Every single day he would send me one. And it was about a week, and I finally got the courage to do one myself. And I've been doing it every single day. Literally, it's a ritual. There's no willpower. I've been doing it every single day now for over a year. And it's been life-changing for my family, for me. I mean, just for the people around me, it's been unbelievable. And so that's an example of something that's I never in a million years would have thought that up myself. But the fact that somebody who I knew and respected and trusted said, hey, you got to go do this and it'll change your life. And it did.
That's so powerful. And those questions, and just to come back to this for a second, who should I be? What should I do? Those are powerful questions that we don't tend to explore as much today as we used to. And if you think of religion, ignoring people's religious beliefs, one of the benefits of religion is the morality it used to bring to humans, right? And in a wider scale that maybe where it's diminishing a bit today. Hopefully it comes back. Politics is now sort of replaced religion in a lot of ways as the source of morality, which is also interesting. One of the questions that I thought about as you were saying, who should I be and what should I do? One thing that I often ask people, because I get to encounter people through the podcast that are all ranges of ages and ethnicities and different perspectives on people. And one powerful question I've found to ask people is, what did you used to spend time on that you now no longer see as valuable? And it's just a different framework into something we already know, right? There's something in your life, in my life, in everybody's life, where you're spending time on something and you shouldn't be, or it's not helping you get what you want and you're still doing it anyway. If you can figure that out, how much time would you save? And that you can invest in other things where you're getting more meaning, whether it's your morning ritual, Brent, or going to the gym every day or doing something else. We're wasting so much of this. Everybody's oh, we need some more time. It's no, man, you don't need more time. You need to use your time better.
I want to turn that on you and ask you. And maybe there's kind of two realms to think about, like personally, but then also the way you operate your business. What are things you used to spend time doing that you no longer are spending time doing and are seeing the benefits of?
Oh, there's so many lessons here, right? Like one of the things that I used to do was like try to work 20 hours a day because I thought I was productive, like 20 hours a day, instead of matching my energy to the opportunity, right? And instead of matching my focus and attention to what is going to move the needle the most, I would just sort of like brute force things. And maybe that's something I needed to do to get where I am today. And maybe it was just a waste of time. But I look back going, man, like there's a lot of stuff I did at like 11 p.m. at night where I'm like, oh, I should have just gone to bed. The other thing is I call it the wrong side of right, but I was often, especially at the intelligence agency where, you know, you're a knowledge worker and you're reasonably successful, you have so much of your identity wrapped up in being right. I would spend a lot of my time just trying to prove I was right instead of looking for the best solution to the problem. Because I thought if I wasn't right, then what am I?
Yeah.
Right? Like I can't be wrong because
it's an identity issue. Yeah.
Right. Because if I'm wrong, then what the hell am I doing here? Like it doesn't make sense. And so you spend all this time ignoring these really good ideas. And as a business operator, it's totally different, right? And now it's like, man, if I have the best idea, it's probably a bad idea. but it's all about the outcome over my ego. And so maybe that's a necessary sort of like transition that everybody goes through. Maybe it's just something that I went through. But man, the change between working in an organization and then operating an organization, I mean, that happened pretty quickly where I'm like, I don't care about me being right anymore. I care about getting it right.
Well, I mean, maybe we just transitioned. You are an owner and operator of a business, and you've had a number of businesses through the years that you've been involved with. So you have a really interesting perspective. What leaps forward did you experience in your business when you tackled a particular area of knowledge?
One thing I've come to appreciate is that good outcomes have more to do with good positions than good decisions. If you are in a good position, the options available to you are all good. If you are in a bad position, there's only one path that's going to lead you out of that, and good luck finding it. I think about that a lot in terms of how do I put myself in a position where I'm never forced into bad decisions, because things go from bad to worse really quickly. You can make the best decision, but if you have a bad hand, you're still going to lose. But if you have a great hand and you make an average decision, you're going to look like a genius. And so I think about like, how do I keep myself in a good position? How do I plant seeds today for next year? How do I make it so that we're not leveraged and we never sort of depend on the kindness of strangers? And what things go into a good position? How do we make time our friend instead of our enemy? How do I go about all of those things? And I think that as an operator, as a person, those are things that factor into it, right? So here's a counterintuitive sort of thing that puts you in a good position, right? And this is something where we pay every invoice in 72 hours. And that puts us in a worse financial position, in theory, because we could extend that working capital. But it puts us in a better position because people want to work with us.
Yeah.
So we always can work with the best talent. We can always work with the best people. They know they're going to get paid. They know they're going to get paid as soon as we read the email with their invoice. And they never have to worry about it. And they never have to follow up with us. And actually, you know, it's kind of funny because we sometimes get these people are so used to people not paying. You get these like auto emails after like 45 days saying, please pay your invoice. And it's like, well, we paid that like 43 days ago.
When I hear you talk, it reminds me of kind of this idea that efficiency is the enemy of relationship and how important relationships are in terms of compounding.
Yeah, like your actions sort of make time your biggest friend or your worst enemy. So if you're thinking long term, you naturally eliminate a lot of poor behavior. Anybody can get somebody to do something by beating them over the head with a newspaper, right? They're going to do what you want them to do, and you're going to feel successful, and you're going to feel like you got the thing you wanted to do done. But that person is now off a long-term timeline with you, right? Because we all know what it feels like to be on the other side of that relationship. And now they're looking for an exit. Your relationship is fragile. It's not going to survive time. They're looking for a new job. And if they're not looking for a new job, your job has become a job. Life is too short to work with people who think of a job as a job. You want to work with people who are all in, passionate about what they do. And if you think about compounding these relationships, and like we've been friends for 10 years, if you sent me a contract, I wouldn't need a lawyer to read it.
Yeah.
Right? And so we can move faster.
Yeah, speed of trust.
Right? We are not looking at how do I protect myself from this person stabbing me in the back. And I think that it takes a while to get there with people, right? You need consistency, you need sort of long-term actions. And the instant you do something, you can reset that baseline, right? So if you're beating somebody over the head to get something done, to get your willpower, to get this one and we often convince ourselves like, oh, I'm just going to do this and then I'll make it up to you. But we never sort of make it up to them. And that's another lie that we tell ourselves. The better approach to this is just thinking long term, right? And then you eliminate poor behavior. Go into a conversation going, hey, if I'm going to have a relationship with this person for like 50 years, how do I need to approach this conversation? And if you frame your conversation through that sort of mental model, if you will, or that lens, you're going to take a very different approach than you likely were going to before that. And Brent, you're a master at this because you think through like every angle to the conversations. You obsess over like, how do I say this in just the right way? And how do I understand them? Because I really want to know where they're coming from. And maybe there's something in their life going on that I need to know about. And maybe that's why things aren't working. I love your approach to that.
I want to shift a little bit and talk about investing because you're not only an operator, but you're an investor. And you're obviously somebody who's generated resources by operating. So you've accumulated resources and you've taken those resources and, I know a lot about your investing. We've talked very transparently about it back and forth. I can just tell the audience that I consider you a top-notch investor. I think your returns are fantastic. And the breadth of your investing has been far more than mine. Public markets, private markets, real estate. I mean, it seemingly your flexibility in going into a lot of areas of investing is impressive. Maybe you could talk about when did your excitement or interest in investing start and how has that journey really evolved? Like, what are the things that you used to think about investing as principles or ways of going about it that you've maybe stopped doing or things that you started that you wish you knew earlier?
It all started when I was 17. Maybe I was 16. And my parents, who both worked for the military, called their, financial planner, advisor, whatever, came over to the house. And they were like, we have to choose between fixing the roof and fixing the car. I just remember listening to this conversation going, how is this possible that two people who've dedicated their life to service for their country, who do not by any stretch of the imagination live an expensive lifestyle. I mean, I wasn't even allowed to have more than one glass of milk a day because we couldn't afford it. How do they end up in a situation where they're choosing between these two things? I remember just sort of trying to figure out, well, how do I learn more about this? And that started sort of, I would say, my investing journey, because what became apparent is that money can work for you. And a lot of people sort of get into this through Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I had my uncle, who was a huge, huge influence on my life, not only in terms of finances. He ran a business and, just soaking up wisdom when we were over there for dinner. And he always sort of preached that, you can go buy a Rolex or your fancy things with money, or you can buy assets that are going to make cash flow and produce more assets. And I always liked the idea of sort of money working for me. And the reason that I really wanted any of this was I never wanted to be in the situation my parents were in. I never wanted to be having to make these choices. And so I needed to know about money because money was going to enable freedom. And so I just sort of started reading about investing, and you start digging into this. I think it was the Roger Lowenstein book, The Making of an American Capitalist. And that just opened a whole new world where investing can do these things for you and give you this freedom. And, sort of Buffett said that he's a better investor because he's an operator, and a better operator because he's an investor. I can see how that's true now, because like when you invest in a company, and that's how I started, right? Long before I started operating businesses, I invested. And I was successful enough to be in a position where I didn't need to work anymore before I left the government. And it's all numbers on a spreadsheet, until you run a business. This one goes up, that one goes down. You wonder why things aren't more profitable. And when you own and operate a company, you often wonder, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like I often wonder how I'm successful at all, because everything seems so complicated. And the real lesson you learn is like cash is everything. Cash flow is everything. And having money on the balance sheet to take advantage of situations is everything. I don't think you can really truly, like you can understand that lesson, but I don't think you truly appreciate it until you can't make payroll, until you put yourself in a position where it's like, whoa, what was I thinking? I cut it too close.
When you think about the journey from an investing perspective, so taking resources and trying to turn them into more resources and compound them, what mistakes did you make, and what mistakes do you see maybe novices to investing who are trying to become investors? What mistakes do you see them making?
Oh man, I have so many mistakes, so many costly lessons here. One is as a computer science major, it was pretty easy for me to sort of understand the best technology. And it was hard for me to learn because of that the best technology doesn't always win. That cost me a lot of money, right? Because I would often sort of like try to invest in the best technology. And that doesn't always sell the best. It doesn't always serve the customer the best. I mean, I was a bit of a nerd when it came to technology. JCPenney was a really expensive lesson for me, right? When Bill Ackman got involved, brought over Ron Johnson. Success in one domain doesn't necessarily meet success in another. And one of the surprising things about the JCPenney thing was like, he was creating the department store I wanted to shop in, but I don't shop in department stores. And my mom instantly was like, what is JCPenney doing? And she's like a core, JCPenney customer. And I was like, well, they're going to go to everyday low prices. It's going to be brilliant. Like everything's going to look better. It's going to feel better. You're going to pay less. And she's like, but I'm not getting a deal anymore. I'm like, no, you're going to pay less. And she's like, I'm not getting a deal anymore. I'm like, Mom, come on. Like, it should have dawned on me in that moment that this wasn't going to work. And it didn't. And, there's two more indications here. One is that goalposts kept changing, right? Which was a huge red flag that I saw eventually, but I was like really, really slow to see. And then the other thing that I've come to learn is that if I find myself staying awake, searching for information that I don't even know what I'm searching for, I'm just like reading everything, I have no idea what I'm doing because I don't know how to separate what matters from what doesn't. And that's a huge red flag to me. If I don't know what matters, I just spend endless time reading like every press release, every transcript, every 10K, every 10Q, word for word. It's like I'm searching for something. I don't know what I'm searching for. I shouldn't be in that investment. And then there's another investment that I made. It turned out super successful. And I don't want to mention the company because I'm a little worried about getting sued by them. But the person ended up changing, right? And so we're drawn to stories. And Ron Johnson's an example of a story I was drawn to, right? He's creating the department store I want to shop at. But we don't shop at department stores, so it doesn't really matter what we think or want. And we're drawn to people who, as investors, if you grew up sort of reading Warren Buffett and thinking about Berkshire Hathaway and Charlie Munger, you're drawn to people who sound like Warren Buffett. You're drawn to people who say the right things, who want to partner with you, who know exactly, and I'm not saying they're doing this consciously, but they have a good story, and that story sounds very much like, I'm looking for the next Berkshire Hathaway, here it is. And you get this sort of like sperm and egg situation where you close your mind to all these other ideas and all these other possibilities, and you're like, this is great. How do I put a lot of money into this? Finally, I've found the holy grail of what I'm looking for. And then what happens is that you ignore the evidence to the contrary in these situations. And in this one particular investment, I ended up getting out at just the right time But these sort of like red flags, and then you always dismiss one red flag, right? You're like, whatever, that happens. And then 2, and then 3, and you sort of like, you slowly convince yourself that these are really good ideas. The other thing that I would say that I witness maybe from other people that is sort of common as operators getting started in investing per se is, success in one domain doesn't always carry over into another. And I recently had a friend I'll call him a colleague, who lost about 50 million because he made this mistake, right? So he ended up making, let's say, about 60 million on a lucky bet. And suddenly he was a great investor. So he didn't realize it was luck. And he's mostly been wiped out since then, right? Because you also have to recognize when you're lucky. And I think it was Munger who said that about Elon Musk, right? He said, the guy's got a 220 IQ, but he thinks it's 230. And eventually that's going to get him in trouble. And I think we all tend to do this, right? It's like if you're a successful operator and you're really smart, you're really good at what you do, it's easy to convince yourself that you'll be really good at investing. I think the other thing that I would sort of encourage people to think about when it comes to investing, if you're a good operator, is what you want worth wanting? Is another zero in your bank account going to make you happier? Because you're going to compete with people who do this full time. And how do you do that dabbling?
Yeah.
Right? The first question I would ask myself is like, can I invest in my business?
Yep.
Second question is like, do I want to invest?
Right. Who am I competing against?
Do I have an edge? Yes.
Yeah. Do I have an edge? And what's the more for?
Yeah. And like, do I want to spend my time doing that? Like, if I'm a successful operator, then by all accounts, like, I've probably got enough money. I'm not really worried about it. I can do all the things I want to do. Do I really want to spend my time investing money when there's a slew of good options out there, especially now, right? The opportunity cost is going up. The default returns or risk-free returns are getting better. Do I really want to spend my time doing this? And can I compete effectively? I don't know, man. I think a lot of the answers to that are probably should not do that in most cases. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I always say either you need to be an investor and take it seriously and try to become excellent at it in some circle of competence, or index. I mean, obviously my firm, we're all in on small business, medium-sized business acquisitions and operations. Like, that's the only thing we do. People ask me, it's like, what do I have my money in? And I say highly illiquid private investments and cash. Those are the two instruments in which I invest in. Shane, I want to ask you, as you've accumulated more resources, I think there's this concept, I've certainly felt it in my life, of lifestyle creep. How has your lifestyle changed for the better? And I would say maybe we could benchmark 10 years ago when we first met. How's your lifestyle changed for the better as you've accumulated more resources? And how has potentially your lifestyle changed for the worse as a result of having more?
Yeah, that's a super hard question. I mean, in terms of practical things, like I spent a lot more money creating time than I ever would have before, where, the opportunity cost of my time I thought of as lower, and it should always be increasing, right? The opportunity cost of your time should always be increasing because time is finite. And as you get older, you get less and less of it. So you should value it more and more in a way. And so, I'll pay people to like mow the lawn now, whereas I would have done that before. And even if I'm just taking a nap, like I used to think that I had to do something productive during that time. And now I'm like, no, I don't. How do I spend more time doing more of what I want to do and less time doing less of what I don't want to do? And I'm fortunate that I can hire people to do the things I don't want to do. And I drink a lot better wine than I used to, but you got me started on that. So like, but this is the other problem, right? Like once you have friends
that's exactly right.
Introduce you to this world that you're like, I would rather not know, to be honest. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I would rather not know what good wine tastes like in some ways, because now it's like, well, that's all I want.
I'm sorry that I've harmed you so much. The wine. David suffered the exact same fate. So
I don't drink wine unless I'm with you.
That's the strategy.
So I try to think a lot about like, what do I want also versus like, what is society sort of telling me to want, or what do I want because I'm hanging around somebody? Like, do I like wine because I like wine, or do I like wine because, Brent likes wine and I like Brent? And wine's maybe a poor example, but like cars are a great example of this. Like I don't have a thing for cars, but I have a lot of friends with like amazing cars. And sometimes I sort of like catch myself thinking, well, I should just get a, whatever. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want a car. Like I beat my car up. I like load skis on it. I take the kids to ski hills. I like burn around the middle of the forest in this thing. Like there's a fancy car would last like a week with me before it had a ding and a scratch on it.
I think that's a heck of a takeaway. Shane, I want to close by asking you, if you could go back in time and spend a couple hours with your, let's call it 30-year-old version of yourself, what topics would you discuss and what advice would you give to him?
Invest in Apple. Kidding. Well, maybe not. I think the one piece of advice I'd give myself that's been a lesson that I've learned a couple of times is that a lack of patience changes the outcome. There's a natural speed to things. They can be inevitable. We know that if you spend less than you make, you put the difference into an index fund and you wait a long time, you're going to end up in a really good position. But if you try to speed that up, you can often put yourself in a really bad position. And I think I was always in a hurry to get things. I wanted to just get to financial freedom. I wanted to just make it to the next milestone. And then two things, a byproduct of that. One, it's fragile, right? So you're often taking risks you don't even know you're taking. And the second is you enjoy the climb a lot less. And if you don't enjoy the climb, like you're not going to enjoy the top of the mountain. Sometimes we fall down a little bit and we just get back up and we climb up again. But you have to enjoy that climb. And I find the lack of patience means that you're always like, hey, what's the climb I'm going to be doing next week instead of the climb I'm on today? And it's sort of like, for those of you who have kids that are listening, we all know somebody who's like, oh, I can't wait till my kids are out of diapers. And then that same person is like, I can't wait till my kids are in school. And then that same person is like, I can't wait till the kids are like teenagers and they can make their own meals and they can do all these things on their own. I can't wait till my kids leave. And then their kids leave and then they're like, man, I wish I had my kids back. They're always just focused on the next phase. And it's like, man, just be where your feet are. Be where you are today.
Thank you for listening, and thank you so much to Shane Parrish for taking the time to come and talk to us. Check out the show notes for how you can follow Shane in his learning journey, and look out for his new book coming out later in this year, 2023. So, who's someone that you could send this episode to? Maybe something was said in here that you think would resonate or be helpful to them. Send them a text, shoot them an email. The Permanent Podcast is in full swing now. We intend to publish something every week. We'll have more conversations from around the Permanent Equity House, and one of my favorite series we do, 5-Minute Management. Short form, actionable insights to help you as you operate, manage, and work on your team.
Hey, it's Mark Brooks. This is 5-Minute Management. A lot of uncertainty in the market right now, in the operating environment. There is an increasing likelihood that I may be managing a business that's in crisis. What are some things that would be helpful from a manager who has managed businesses in crisis in the past, and give you kind of a playbook or things to be thinking about maybe before you get there?
Hey, this is Brent Beshore coming to you today with 5-Minute Management from Permanent Equity. Today I want to talk about the topic of brand. Most small business owners don't think brand's important, and to be honest, they may be right. But today I want to talk to you about why brand is important, no matter if you're running a construction firm or a direct-to-consumer business, no matter if you're a small business or you're a large business, because what is brand?
And we'll have more conversations with guests from outside of Permanent Equity. Coming soon, a new Hariharan.
I haven't seen yet at a stage of the company where you could say, hey, let me just hire for a manager and not a builder. Because I think having that builder mentality goes a long way, no matter how much you scale. But I think just because you're a builder, if you're a roadblock to scaling, that's bad.
John Fiorentino.
Quick story is I made a fake website, said this is a new thing. It's kind of like an exclusive Airbnb for dope dudes. In 2 days, I got 500 signups. And for a year and a half, I went to go stay on their couch and I basically would show up, be like, yo, what's up? I'm the dope dude. And that was how I lived for like 2 years. And then boom, Kickstarter happened. I dropped Gravity Blanket and I literally went till waking up with a couple $1 million in my bank account because Gravity went viral.
So check out your podcast app every Tuesday, or you can head to permanentequity.com for more audio and written articles, posts, and essays. As always, if you're someone who's ready to start a conversation about partnering with Permanent Equity, we'd love to hear from you. We know we won't be the right fit for everyone, but we're the perfect fit for someone, and maybe that's you. You can go to permanentequity.com and click on the Connect tab, or you can email Emily at the letter E at permanentequity.com. That's right, she has a one-letter email that's only for important people. Me, I have my full name like a total loser. All right, thanks so much for listening. Until next time, have a great day.